My father's lawyer had an office on the second floor of a building that smelled like carpet cleaner and old wood. I'd been there once, 15 years ago, to sign papers for a property line dispute. I remember thinking the chairs were too soft for a place where people discussed money. Gerald Kessler. 31 years he'd worked with my father. He was at my parents' wedding. He held me as an infant. And on a Tuesday morning in October, he sat across from me, adjusted his glasses, and read my father's will without looking up once. My sister received the house. My brother received the savings account and the land upstate. My mother received everything else. My name wasn't on a single page. I sat there and waited. I actually smiled because I assumed there was a second page, a codicil, something Gerald had set aside for the end. Gerald cleared his throat. "Your name does not appear in this document." I looked at my mother. She was staring at her hands. Her knuckles were white around her purse strap. She already knew. Gerald continued reading. Dates, signatures, legal language, but I couldn't hear him anymore. Just a low hum, like the room had lost its air. My father had been sick for 11 weeks. He changed his will 6 weeks before he died. He was lucid. He was specific. Gerald confirmed that 3 times without me asking. I kept thinking about the previous Sunday. 7 days before he signed that document, my father was standing in his backyard, showing my daughter Emma where the tomatoes were coming in. She was 9. He laughed when she pulled one off the vine too early. He said, "That's okay, sweetheart. Some things aren't ready yet, but they're still worth holding on to." 1 week later, he sat in this same chair, in this same office, and told his lawyer to remove my name from every page. I couldn't connect those 2 men. The father in the garden and the father in the will. Gerald set the folder down. He reached into his desk drawer and placed something on the table between us. A sealed envelope, cream-colored. The same stationery my father used for everything. Birthday cards, notes he'd leave in my lunchbox when I was 7. The letter he sent me when I left for college that I still keep in my nightstand. My name was on the front, in his handwriting. Gerald's voice changed. Softer, almost careful. "Your father gave me this the same day he signed the will. He sat right where you're sitting. He sealed it himself." I reached for it. Gerald didn't move, but something shifted in his face. "He told me you'd want to tear it up." My hand stopped. He said, "Read it anyway." I turned the envelope over. On the front, below my name, my father had written a single line in blue ink, the same pen he used for everything. "Don't read this until you're angry enough to listen." I stared at those words. That was his handwriting. The same slant from birthday cards, from the check he wrote when my wife and I bought our first house. Now it was on a sealed envelope attached to a will that said I didn't exist. My mother's hand came down on mine, gently, but firm enough to stop me. She didn't look at me. She looked at the envelope. "If you open that now," she whispered, "you'll never forgive him." I pulled my hand back, not because I believed her, because the way she said it, like she'd rehearsed it, like she'd been waiting to say exactly those words in exactly this moment. Gerald spoke again, barely above a whisper. "He cried, you know." I looked up. The entire time he was signing. 31 years I've been practicing law. I've sat across from people losing everything, homes, marriages, children. Gerald took off his glasses, set them on the desk. I have never seen a man cry like that while signing a legal document. He paused, put his glasses back on, looked at me the way people look at you when they know something you don't, and wish they could forget it. He said to me, "My son is going to hate me, but one day he'll understand. And when he does, I need him to know it was the hardest thing I ever did." The envelope sat between us on the desk. I could feel my father's handwriting under my thumb. I looked at my mother. "You knew." She didn't deny it. She didn't blink. She just sat there with her purse on her lap, knuckles white, like she'd been bracing for this moment since before we walked in. "How long?" "Since before he signed it." The room went still. Gerald shifted in his chair but said nothing. "You knew he was cutting me out. You sat across from me at Sunday dinners. You called me on my birthday. You watched me bring Emma over to see him. And the whole time I was keeping a promise," she said. "To who?" "To your father." I stood up. There was nowhere to go. Gerald's office was small, bookshelves on every wall, one window behind his desk, blinds half closed. "I begged him," she said quietly. "For 3 weeks I begged him not to do it." "Then why didn't you stop him?" She didn't answer right away. She looked down at her hands, turned her wedding ring once, twice. "Because he was right." Those 3 words landed harder than anything Gerald had read from the will. I turned to Gerald. "You sat in this room and watched him cry while he signed away his own son, and you let him do it." Gerald didn't respond immediately. He placed both hands flat on the desk, pressed down slightly, like he was steadying himself. "I've represented your father since 1993. I've handled every kind of family situation you can imagine. Divorces, custody battles, estates torn apart by greed." He looked at me directly. "I have never, not once in 31 years, done for any client what your father asked me to do." "What does that mean?" Gerald held my gaze for a moment. Then he looked away, toward the window. The blinds cut the light into thin lines across his desk. He opened the bottom drawer. He pulled out a brown folder, thicker than the will, older looking, edges soft from years of handling. He placed it on the desk, but kept his hand on top of it. "Your father came to me 8 months before he changed anything. 8 months." Gerald's voice was different now, not the lawyer's voice, something underneath it. "Most people walk in, sign, walk out. Your father sat in that chair for 2 hours the first time. Didn't sign a thing." He paused. "Didn't even open his mouth for the first 40 minutes. Gerald tapped the folder once, twice, like he was deciding something. He came back 6 more times, over 8 months. Every time, he'd sit down, take a breath like he was about to speak, and then just stop, like the words wouldn't come in the right order. He slid the folder 1 inch closer to me, then stopped. The 7th time, he brought this. Gerald looked at my mother. She was staring at the folder like it was something alive. "He told me everything," Gerald said. "And then he asked me to help him do the hardest thing he'd ever done." "Which was what?" Gerald didn't answer. He took off his glasses again, pressed his thumb and forefinger against the bridge of his nose, put them back on. "Make you hate him." The room went completely still. I could hear the clock on Gerald's bookshelf. I'd never noticed it before. "He needed you to be angry," Gerald said quietly. "Not sad, not confused, angry. He was very specific about that." "Why?" Gerald leaned forward. His voice dropped. "Because a sad son grieves and moves on. A confused son asks questions for a while and then stops." He looked at me. "But an angry son digs. An angry son doesn't let go. An angry son tears apart everything his father ever touched until he finds the answer." My mouth was dry. The envelope was still on the desk, the blue ink catching the light. "Your father didn't remove you from his will to punish you." Gerald slid the folder 1 inch closer. "He removed you so you'd come looking." He opened it to the first page. This is a letter your father wrote to a woman named Ruth Calloway in 1987. I'd never heard that name in my life. Gerald looked at my mother. Your mother has. My mother closed her eyes, not dramatically, the way someone closes their eyes when they've been standing too long, and their body finally says, enough. Gerald reached into the drawer again, slowly, like the drawer held something heavier than paper. He took out a small cassette tape and set it on the desk beside the folder. Your father recorded this the same day he signed the will. He was sitting in that chair. Gerald placed his hand next to the tape, but didn't touch it. He asked me to play it for you, but only after the reading. Only after you saw the envelope. Only after you asked why. I'm asking. Gerald didn't press play. He looked at my mother first. She was staring at the tape, not at me, not at Gerald, at the tape. The way you stare at something you've been dreading for months. Mom? Nothing. Did you know about this? She took a breath, then another. The kind of breathing you do when you're trying to keep your voice level and you're not sure you can. I've heard it. 3 words, and the room changed. I waited. Gerald waited. The clock ticked. He played it for me, she said finally. The night before he came to Gerald's office, he sat at the kitchen table and played it on that old recorder he kept in the closet. She stopped, swallowed. And I asked him not to do it. I begged him. I told him there had to be another way. Another way to do what? She looked at Gerald. Gerald looked at the tape. Neither of them spoke. The silence lasted long enough for me to hear the sprinkler system turn on outside Gerald's window. Your mother is right that she asked him not to, Gerald said carefully. But your father believed you needed to hear it from him. Not from her. Not from me. From him. He put his hand on the tape player. This is your father's voice, recorded 6 weeks before he died. He's speaking directly to you. Gerald pressed play. A faint hiss. The sound of someone breathing too close to a microphone. A chair creaking, like someone shifting their weight, trying to get comfortable in a body that wouldn't let them. Then my father's voice. And everything inside me went quiet. It wasn't the voice from Sunday phone calls. Not the voice that said, "Drive safe," and "Tell Emma I said good game." That voice was steady, practiced. The voice of a man who had spent decades making sure no one worried about him. This voice was stripped bare. "I don't know how to start this," he said. A pause. I could hear him swallow. "I've been sitting here for 20 minutes trying to figure out how to say this, and I keep writing things down and crossing them out because none of it sounds like me. It all sounds like an excuse." Another pause. Longer. The tape hissed. "So I'm just going to say it the way it happened. And you're going to hate me for a while. Maybe a long while. But Gerald promised me he'd make you listen to the whole thing. So I'm trusting that." I looked at Gerald. He was staring at the desk. My mother had closed her eyes. "When you were 9 years old," my father said, "something happened that your mother and I decided you would never know about." The tape hissed. "We were wrong to decide that. I know that now. But back then it felt like the only way to keep you whole." His voice cracked on the word whole. A long silence on the tape. So long I thought it had ended. Then there was a woman. And she came to the house one afternoon while you were at school. She told me something about our family that I spent the next 30 years trying to make untrue. The tape went silent again. Then, barely a whisper. I couldn't. I played the tape 3 more times that afternoon. Each time, the same pause before he spoke. The same careful breath. Like he was choosing every word, knowing they'd outlive him. I sat in Gerald's office until the light shifted across the desk and the shadows reached the far wall. Gerald brought me water once. I didn't touch it. Then I picked up the phone and called my Aunt Ruth, my mother's sister. The only person from that generation still alive besides my mother. She answered on the second ring, like she'd been sitting next to the phone. "I heard Dad's tape," I said. Silence. Not the silence of someone confused, the silence of someone caught. "Ruth, I told your mother to destroy that tape. She didn't." "No." A long breath. "She never could bring herself to. He said he learned something about our family. Something he spent 30 years. I know what he said." The sharpness in her voice stopped me cold. "Your father made a promise to your mother. Before he got sick. Before the will. Before any of it." She paused. I could hear her shifting the phone from one ear to the other. "He promised she would never have to be the one to tell you." "Tell me what?" Silence. "Ruth, tell me what?" "That's not my place. Dad is dead. There's nobody left to protect." She went quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, almost a whisper. "There's one person left." I waited. She didn't explain. "Your father didn't just change the will," she said finally. "He changed it because of what your mother found." "Found where?" "In the house." "What house?" "Not your house." I gripped the phone harder. When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. He told her everything. And then he made her promise. And then he went to Gerald and rewrote the will so that you would never have a reason to look. My knuckles ached. A reason to look for what? Ruth went quiet. I could hear her breathing. I could hear a clock ticking somewhere in her house. The same kind of silence that had filled Gerald's office all afternoon. The house on Ridgefield Lane. What house on Ridgefield Lane? The one your father bought in 1974. She paused. The one he never sold. I'd never heard of a house on Ridgefield Lane in my life. "Ruth, who lives there?" She hung up. I drove to Ridgefield Lane the next morning, 40 minutes from Gerald's office. I didn't call ahead. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell anyone. The house was small, white siding, green shutters, a garden out front that someone still maintained, trimmed hedges, fresh mulch, a ceramic pot with geraniums by the door. This was not an abandoned property. Someone lived here. Someone who cared about geraniums. I sat in the car for a long time. Engine off, windows down. I could hear a sprinkler somewhere behind the house, and a dog barking 2 streets over. My father bought this house in 1974. I was born in 1975. He owned it my entire life, and never said a word. I walked to the front door and knocked. The door opened slowly. A woman, mid-60s. Gray hair pulled back, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She looked at me, and her expression shifted. Not surprise, not fear, recognition. Like she'd been expecting this knock for a very long time. "You look just like him," she said quietly. She opened the door wider. On the hallway wall, directly across from the entrance, there was a framed photograph. My father, young, maybe 30, standing on this porch, holding a baby. He was smiling in a way I had never seen in any family photo. Not the smile he wore at Christmas or in the backyard with Emma. Not posed, not performing, just happy. I stood in the hallway, staring at that photograph. The woman stood behind me. She didn't rush me. She didn't explain. She just waited. "He paid the mortgage every month," she said finally. 49 years. Never missed once. I couldn't stop looking at his face. "Who is the baby?" I asked. She didn't answer. She walked past me toward the kitchen, stopped in the doorway without turning around. "Sit down. I'll make coffee." I didn't sit down. I stood in the hallway with the photograph. Halfway to the counter, she paused, her back still to me. "He told me this day would come. He said you'd find the house after he died. He said you'd be angry." "I am." She turned around. "Good," she said. "Then you're ready." She set the coffee down and placed the photograph between us on the kitchen table. "That baby is you," she said. "You were 4 months old." I picked up the photograph. My father's face. My face, apparently. This porch. This house I'd never seen before yesterday. "Your father brought you here once, just once. He drove 3 hours with you in a car seat. Your mother didn't know." She wrapped both hands around her mug. The steam rose between us. "He stood right where you knocked and said, 'I need you to understand what I'm asking.' He was 26 years old. He looked like he hadn't slept in a month." "What was he asking?" She looked at the photograph, then at me, then back at the photograph. "Your father made a mistake when he was 23. She paused. "Not a crime, not something evil." Another pause. "A mistake that would have cost your mother everything if it ever came to light." She looked at me. "And it would have cost you." "What mistake?" She didn't answer. She lifted her mug, set it down without drinking, lifted it again. "He came to me because I was the only person who knew. He said, 'I will do anything to make sure my son never pays for what I did.'" Her voice changed on the last part, softer, like she was hearing him say it again. "And he meant it. I've never heard anyone mean anything more." She set her mug down. "Your father's brother, your Uncle Jack, co-signed a business loan when you were 3 years old." She stopped, looked at the window. "Jack defaulted." Another pause. "The creditors came after your father because of how the partnership was structured. They took the savings, the equity in the house, nearly the land." She turned back to me. "Your father spent 11 years paying off a debt that was never his." The coffee was getting cold. Neither of us had touched it. "He swore that would never happen to his children. Not to you, not to your sister, not to your brother." She stood up slowly. "So he started separating everything, quietly, legally, making sure that if anything ever went wrong, a lawsuit, a creditor, a claim, no one could touch what was meant for you." She walked to the kitchen counter, opened a drawer, took out a small wooden box. Pine. Simple. No lock. A small brass hinge that caught the light. She placed it in front of me. "He built this the year you were born." She opened it. Inside, a trust document dated the year of my birth. My name on every page. The house on Ridgefield Lane, purchased in my name through a holding company. The savings account my brother received in the will, a mirror of one already in my name. The land my sister inherited, a second adjacent parcel, deeded to a trust I didn't know existed. Emma's name, added the year she was born. I turned page after page, my father's handwriting in the margins. Notes, instructions, updates he'd made every few years, adjusting amounts, adding names, crossing out old account numbers and writing new ones. Everything my father took away from me in Gerald's office, he had already given me, years earlier, quietly, without telling anyone, without needing me to thank him. The will was a decoy, a legal firewall. If anyone ever challenged it, they'd find nothing to take. Because on paper, I had nothing. In reality, I had more than anyone. He'd been building this my entire life, the way other fathers build additions onto a house, quietly, on weekends, without being asked. And the letter, "Don't read this until you're angry enough to listen." He knew. He knew I'd be hurt. He knew I'd stay away from the hospital those last weeks. He knew I'd sit in Gerald's office and feel erased. He needed me to feel that. Because if I didn't look disinherited, the firewall wouldn't hold. He traded my love for my safety. And he did it knowing he'd never get to explain. I drove home that night with the pine box on the passenger seat. Emma was asleep when I got back. I sat in the driveway for a long time, engine off, watching the kitchen light my wife had left on. Then I took out my father's letter and read the last line again. "I know you'll be angry. I know you'll think I chose everyone else over you. But one day, you'll sit somewhere quiet and you'll add it all up. And you'll realize I gave you everything I had. I just couldn't let you know." I folded the letter along its original creases and put it back in the envelope. The blue ink caught the porch light for a moment. The same handwriting, the same slant. Then I went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and wrote my father a letter I'll never be able to send. I told him I understood.